Hello and welcome back, I'm ShyWizard. Gonna have a look at animals. Been meaning to do a video on this for a little while now, just been busy with other different things. The carrot videos I've been doing have taken up quite a lot of time trying to figure out how to get that working correctly and whatever else. So finally I've managed to get round to doing this. So I've got the HofBergman Reloaded map here. This is version 1.0.0.2 by Farmer Andy. There may be a newer version available, I don't know, this is the only version I have. So, but it's got what I need, so I don't, that's fine with me. What I want to do here is I'm going to open up the actual map in Giants Editor. So the animals I want to work with today are ponies, which is what we have on the HofBergman map, plus many others, geese, donkeys, all sorts of stuff. Now, I'm not entirely sure when it comes to carrots, because I've incorporated carrots into this particular sample mod map that I'm going to be working with. And what I want to do is try and change it up a little bit, the mod itself, what we have here on HofBergman, to potentially incorporate the use of the carrots as well. At the end of the day, it's a game, so you can do what you want, feed them sand if you want to. So we've got our pony husbandry section over here, and I'm going to go into my interactive trigger just so I can press the F key and zoom over to it. And at the end of the day, this potentially will show you how to adapt whatever mod you're going to be playing around with to your own needs and your own play style and whatever else. So like I said, with this particular mod set up on the HofBergman map, we have all of our parts to do with the N company script, and we have some inputs and outputs. So we have our inputs. I'll just very quickly go through these. So we have an input here of pony. Then we have our straw, and also water, and then hay or dry grass windrow. And we also have our output products, foals, which is what this particular unit creates, and again our manure. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to highlight the pony husbandry cube here in the cinemagraph. I'm going to take the name from the attributes window. I'm going to go to File, Export Selection with Files. I'm going to come to my desktop. I'm going to create a new folder here. We'll paste in the name there, open up that folder, and we'll paste in the name of our i3D, and I'm going to click Save. And I'm going to click No to this parent directory structure, because I want to create my own structure and whatever else. So for now I'm just going to close down the HofBergman map, don't need that open just now. And what I want to do is actually go into the particular mod here and change it around a little bit. Not quite sure where I'm going to go with this, but we'll just see where we end up. Excuse me one moment. I've been doing so many videos back to back, my voice is starting to go a bit, so I apologise for that, you just have to bear with me. Okay, so if we actually go into our textures here, we have some bits and pieces in here, and I want to try and make this a little bit more optimised so I don't have folders upon folders upon folders. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select all of these parts. You don't have to do this, this is just something I want to do. And I'm going to paste them into there. Then I'm going to go into my triggers folder, cut this and paste this also into my textures folder. And I can then remove both of those folders like so. And I'm going to go into the actual i3D within Notepad++ here. And I'm going to remove anything to do with the HofBergman map itself. Again, this is just to optimize it slightly so we don't have really long path file names and folders upon folders and all the rest of it. You can clearly see I'm using the HofBergman map, so I'm not hiding anything, I'm just trying to optimize it slightly a little so that like I said, we don't have massive great path file names and whatever else. Okay, so going to do that. We have our bits and pieces to our sounds and whatever else, but obviously I'll be changing some of the parts around to again optimize it slightly. You could mess around with the shaders. I'm not going to get into map optimization and stuff like that because that would make the video massively long, but I want to try and optimize it as best I can before I bring it in. Okay, so what I want to do here is I'm going to open up the pony husbandry i3D in our Giants Editor session, and what I try to do if I can when I export a mod and then before I bring it into another map, I want to re-zero everything in my attributes here so that when it brings it into the map, it brings it in at the 0 position on that particular map. Just makes it a little easier to find on the map if you like. So if you're working with a somewhat smaller map, for example, and this was taken from a 4x map on the edge of the 4x map, it would be way off the edge of a 2x map, and you then would have to try and find it, and it may then be more difficult. So if you just re-zero, it'll bring it into the 0 position on the map. Sometimes for me that makes it easier to find. Anyway, moving on. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to expand this out a little bit. I've got some visuals in here for this rusty old water tank. I don't particularly want that. And the area that I'm putting this into is quite small and confined, so the less I have to mess about within there, the better in my opinion. So I'm going to delete the actual visuals tag completely because I don't need it, because the visuals for the area are going to be separate from the actual mod itself, so I can make changes without having to restructure the mod and whatever else for the visual side of things. And then what I also want to do is I want to remove the straw plane, because I don't really want that, again, for the area that I'm going to create. Now, in my area where I live, we have quite a lot of horses and things like that, and they are set up in a somewhat open area. All you tend to have is perhaps maybe 1 or 2 of these round feeders with straw hay in them, and then a water trough of some description, and that's pretty much it. And the rest of it is just an open field. There's not very much in the way of shelter or whatever else. So I want to try and reproduce that. This is obviously I'm going to be using my sample mod map, which is based on Goldcrest Valley. But for me, this is what I want to set up. So I'm going to attempt to do that. So if I actually go into my input triggers here before we start getting into too much, we've obviously got our straw plane and the setup and whatever else. Now on the HofBergman map, there is another field type called bedding material, which I don't have on this particular sample mod map and all the rest of it, so don't really need any of that stuff. So what I'm going to do is literally delete all of the entries to do with straw within that particular transform group, the tip trigger, the shovel target, everything there. So I'm going to just literally remove all of that. What I want to try and do here is recreate my hay bale, but I want to create a straw bale set up instead. Now the way that this tends to work with textures and things like that, which I've explained in the past, you can't just make a duplicate of this and then retexture it in the same i3D. You have to export it first and then make your changes and then re-import it again. Otherwise, if you duplicate it, whatever texture change you make to one will then make the same texture change to the other. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to make a copy of that, just because it's easier. And at the end of the day, it's just a name. It doesn't mean anything, because I can change what I want to change in the actual cinegraph here. So I'm going to create a new folder here, and I'm going to just paste that in, and we'll again paste that into there, go save. This particular case, I want to keep the parent directory structure, just so when I re-import it, all of the textures are going to be in the same folder layout, and it will just make it somewhat easier for me. So now that I've got that like so, I'm going to minimize that down for now, and we'll minimize that down. I've got my bale on my desktop here, and we've got our objects round bale, and you can see this is for our hay, and our square bale texture also for hay. But what I want to do is obviously get straw. So you can find these wherever you choose to find them. What I'm going to do is go into my Steam folder. If you don't have access to anything else, Steam, the actual Giants installation folder tends to provide almost everything you need when it comes to certain standard textures and stuff like that. So I'm going to go into here into my objects folder, and we have our round bales and square bales. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into the objects folder for my exported bale, and what I want is the actual straw sticks. So I'm going to make a copy of that. Sorry, that was supposed to go in that round bale folder. So I'm going to make a copy of that and put that into there like so. Then I'm going to go into my square bale, and I want my bale straw 240 diffuse, which I'm then going to put into my square bale folder like so. Don't need that anymore, so we can close that down. Now what I can do is go into my i3D for the bale in Notepad++, and I can make some changes here if I want to. But also what I could do is actually open up the bale in Giants Editor, which may be somewhat easier. You can see here we have a bale of hay. The textures represent that and whatever else. But if I actually click on the bale itself and then open up my material editing window, I can come over to here and I can then change the texture within here. we're already using the bale straw 240 normal, so all I need to do is change the diffuse channel, because at the moment we are using the bale hay 240 diffuse. So we'll click on the little dot thing there to bring up the search window, and again with this one I can now choose my straw bale and click open, and this is what will be displayed. If I click off of that, you can see now we have straw. Fantastic. So I need to just do the same with the sticks. So again, we're using straw sticks normal, so we don't need to change that one. I'll come into here and change to my round bale straw sticks from the hay, and I click open, and I can click close. And because these are using the same texture, when I change one, it also changes the other one as well. So now we've made our new bale of straw. I can go ahead and save. And if I close that down, when I then go into my pony husbandry setup, because I exported the folder structure exactly the same, keeping the parent directory structure, everything is actually set up in exactly the same manner. So all I need to do now is literally just take the whole lot, cut it with Control X, come over to here, Control V to paste it in. I can merge all of these folders and just skip the rest because they already exist. And I can now delete that folder because I no longer require it. And if we now go into here, into our objects, we now have that same setup we created with our hay and our straw in there, and our hay and straw in here. Just keeps the folder structure the same, and again comes back to optimization and stuff like that, so we don't have multiple folders with just one or two textures in. We can incorporate them all together. So we're going to go back into our pony husbandry setup here. What I want to do here, I'm going to take the visibility node section right down to the round bale feeder, and I'm going to copy that with Control C. I'm going to come up to my Rostov 2 where we deleted all of the parts earlier on. I'm going to go Control V, which will then paste all of that in. But now what I need to do is highlight my bale, which is still a hay bale texture at the moment. I need to highlight that and delete it. Then I can go into File and Import and bring in my new bale, which will come at the bottom of the scenegraph. But if I go Control X and click on my visibility nodes, Control V, it will put it in exactly the right place. Okay, so what I want to do now then is, I've had a bit of a play around. I want to create another input, because we have our ponies, obviously, we have our straw, which we've just created a new setup for that, have our water and our dry grass windrow. So what I want to do now is add another one in for our carrots. So what I'm going to do is go create transform group, and I'm going to then cut that, and I'll put it into my input triggers, and then I'm going to just take that like so, copy it, we'll paste it in and change that to a 5 like so. Then what I need to do is make a few bits and pieces in here, but I need to obviously set everything up in here first of all. So first then, what we're going to do is go capacity, and this needs to be an integer. So what we can do here, we're just going to put 3000, that'll be fine. And then we need to go factor. Now this is something that you'll need to obviously play around with and just get it working. Once we get everything set up and whatever else, might need to change the factor to something higher or lower. This needs to be set up as a float, so we're going to go into there. Let's set it up as 0.5 for now, that's fine. And then what we need to do is obviously add in our fill type. So we're going to go fill type, fill types even, and we'll put this as a string, and we'll add, and we need to put in there carrot, make sure we spelt it right, yep. And then we need to add a name as well, so we can link everything together. And this also needs to be a string. And what we'll do is we'll just take this one here, we'll paste that in, and then we'll just change that to carrot, like so. Okay, so we've now got that part set up. The next thing we need to do then is create the actual triggers and the bits and pieces so that it knows what it is and where it's going to go and all the rest of it. Right, so the next thing we need to do then is create our tip trigger within here. So we're going to create another transform group. We're going to cut that and paste it into there. And then we're going to name this tip trigger. Like so. It needs to be named exactly like that so that the actual script can recognize it. And what we will do then is we'll just move this away a little bit. We can adjust all of this stuff once we actually get it onto the map itself. Actually, what I will do is I'm going to re-zero that. What I'll do is I'll move the main transform group, I think. Yeah, let's move the main transform group. So we'll move this over the way. Like I said, all of this stuff can be moved and adjusted once we get it into the map itself. But it keeps my tip trigger set up at 0. That's what I was thinking. So the next thing we need to do then is actually let's create our tip trigger. So we need to go create primitives. We want a cube. So we'll take that cube, cut it, and we'll paste it into tip trigger. So it puts it on our 0 point, which is why I wanted to do it that particular way. And we need to obviously resize this slightly. So we'll just go into here and we'll say 5 by 5. And we'll set this to 3. That'll be fine. Again, these sorts of things can be adjusted once we get it into game and everything. We need to make this a rigid body, so we'll go rigid body, and it needs to be a trigger. We'll change this, so we need to go, actually we won't do that, we'll just go non-renderable distance blending, like so. And that should be good there. So we've got all that set up. And what we can do then, with it highlighted, we can go edit, freeze transform, and scale, and we click apply, and it puts all of the scale back to 1, 1, and 1. Just something I like to do. And then we're pretty much good there. Then what we can do is actually create our start and end point, which is why I created the trigger first. So we're going to go create transform group, create transform group. We'll highlight both of those, and we'll cut them with Control X, and we'll paste them into there. And then what we'll do is we'll actually move the cube down to the bottom. And then we need to name these. So we want trigger start and trigger end. So we're going to go trigger start and trigger end, like so. And we can then name this to tip trigger as well. So we'll tip trigger, like so. And then we need to have our plane. Now I've created one, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go file, import, and I've created a heap. So I'm going to import that, cut it, click on my tip trigger, and we'll paste it in. And we have our carrot heap. Again, all of this can be adjusted once we actually get it into game. So next thing we need to do then is create our parts for our actual tip trigger. So window, and then we need to go to our user attributes again, bring that up, and we need to add in a few parts here. So we want to bring in is area trigger. This needs to be a boolean, so we'll click on that. Is area trigger yes. Then we want a move max y. So move max y. This needs to be a float. And we also want move min y. So we'll go move min y. This needs to also be a float. And we want our move index or moving index. So moving index, and this needs to be a string. We also need not move back, so that the actual heap doesn't move back once we've actually put our bits and pieces into it. So that also needs to be a boolean, and we can click that one so it's true, and then we want our trigger index index, which needs to be a string, sorry, a string, not a float. Trigger index string, and then we want our trigger width as well. Trigger width, which also needs to be a string, I believe. No, that needs to be a float. Okay, I like these ones. We can adjust that because we'll need to have it against the actual terrain to judge the height that it's going to move and all the rest of it. So we have our tip trigger, which is index 2. So our trigger index is a 2, and our moving index is a 3. I'm taking that from the attributes, so our moving index is a 3. Our trigger width, we'll say that is 2.5. That's something you'll need to play around with and just get it roughly around right. You can change that to whatever's, find what works for you. You may not want to go as far as I am here with this, but I figured why not? We've got the carrots in the map, so may as well incorporate them and everything else. And I want to just have this so it's kind of like on a, just shows up in the field as if we're tipping them on the ground sort of thing. And I'll set up some sort of display, hopefully, if I can get that to work, so I know where I'm meant to tip them and everything else. So yeah, so I'm pretty sure we've got everything set up in that part there. We've put our names into there and just rechecking everything. We've got everything. That's going to be adjusted once we get it into game and everything else. So we should be pretty good there. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Okay, so next thing I want to do, and I just did say actually we can change all that stuff once we get in a game. What I meant to say was we're going to adjust it once we get into the actual map. Once we've imported it, we can then make our adjustments accordingly with the actual height of the keep and all the rest of it. So what I'm going to do, I'm in my sample mod maps folder, and I'm going to create a new folder again, and I'm going to call this M Company because that's what this is based on, the script, the M Company script. And I'm just going to literally copy the whole folder and move it into there. What I would normally do is try and incorporate some of these parts because we already have a sounds folder. So what I would like to do, what I more than likely would do if I was just doing this, as is, not trying to record it and keep the video short, I would incorporate all the sounds into one folder. We've got shared folders, so I'd incorporate that into one folder, and shaders and so on and so on. But again, for the video, I'm not going to really get too excited about that because it will just take far too long. So I'm going to delete all of those i3Ds because I don't need those anymore because I've now incorporated them into the Pony Husbandry i3D. And then what we'll do is we'll get back into the map in Giants Editor and we'll bring it in to the actual map itself. And then, like I said, we can adjust all the bits and pieces that we need to adjust once we've actually got it in here. Okay, so I've actually created an area on the map itself. This was actually a field, field 24 if memory serves, and I've set up a fenced area here with an animated gate. I've also put in some animal splines, some animated animal splines. These are actually animated ponies. The ponies that I will be working with are animated, but they don't move around the field. So I just wanted to bring something else in as well, where we have certain areas where they will actually sort of walk around as well as graze and do other things. And I've put a fence all the way around it and whatever else. Put some, different terrain textures in and whatever. And I also brought in this shed, which was just literally a copy of this one over here. Just so we have an area, and what I want to do here is set up my heap of carrots in this sort of area, so I know that I'm going to be tipping them in this shed, if you like, and then we can adjust the triggers and everything else to fit the shed. So, okay, what we're going to do then is we're going to actually import the entire lot in. So, first of all, I'm going to do is create another transform group, and I'm going to call this M Company. like so. Hit tab on the keyboard to like make the change. And I'm going to go File, Import. I'm going to go back to my desktop, just make sure I'm in the right folder here. So I'll go M Company, Pony Husbandry, and we'll double click on our O3D. With the Pony Husbandry highlighted, Control X, click on M Company, Control V, pasted in like so. And then we can click Control B, Interactive Placement, and bring it over onto the map. And we can see we've got our field plane of carrots and all the appropriate triggers and whatever else. Now what we can do is with it in the actual area that we're going to be working with, we can adjust it accordingly. So with the actual transform group, the main cube, if you like, the main body of the mod, somewhere centralized in the center of the field that I'm applying it to, I'm then going to move all of the individual parts accordingly. What I'll do here is try and set it up in a way that doesn't interfere with any of the other parts, which is why I left the splines turned on visible, so that I don't accidentally put something in amongst one of the splines and have animals walking through solid objects and things like that. Okay, so what we're going to do then is we're going to look at our actual field types and all the bits and pieces. Now obviously these are the actual ponies themselves, and we have some parts in here. I'm not going to move that one because that's set up in a specific manner with our animal triggers and all the rest of it, and we'll look at the actual positions of those. We have 6 ponies. I'm pretty sure they're almost exactly the same actually, but they're buried somewhere way underneath the map, which is fine. Minus 500 according to the translate Y there. But what we do need to look at is our actual positions. These are the visible nodes where the animals will be spawned into on the actual map surface itself. So we need to obviously work with those as well when we put all of our bits and pieces down. What I would probably say the best way to do this is to actually work with all of the other objects, the objects that are always visible, before we start to then place all of the visible nodes or invisible nodes around the map, because they are invisible, so you can't see them. So you'll end up doing the same thing twice or 3 times if you go a different route. So we're going to take this one first, which is our straw, and we can just move it around wherever we want to. So you might say we'll put our straw over here, and we'll just kind of position this somewhere about right. That looks pretty good to me. I'll just go down just a little bit more. There we go, something like that. Obviously with the bale not in there, there may be some ground showing through, so you may find that you'll get into game and then have to come back in and just raise it up, lower it to get it right. Sometimes I've thought I've got it right in GE and then go into game and it's floating and all sorts of stuff. So especially when it comes to fences and trees and various different objects, so just have a bit of a play around with that. So what have we got next here? We've got our water trough, that's fine. So I might want to say this one's a little bit tricky because of the way it's been set up with the actual trigger itself. It's not quite zeroed on a right angle, so it can be a little bit weird. So again, what I would probably say here is I might move the main transform group into the middle of the field sort of thing, and then work with my liquid trigger separately, if you know what I mean, because it's a little bit easier to move the gizmo around because it's situated on the actual trough itself, whereas the other one is a distance away, and it can then get a little bit difficult to manipulate it around and all the rest of it where you want it to be. So what I'll probably do here is just, if it will let me actually grab hold of the doodah here, there we go. We'll move this one around and put it over against the actual back wall here. Giving me some grief. So let's just move this one around a little bit. Don't need to get it perfect for the video, just want to get it somewhere around about right. And we'll raise it up a little bit so the grass terrain isn't poking through it. Something like that I think will be fine. And then I will go into my, oops, not that one, terrain editing, and just remove the grass texture from inside of there a little bit, like so. And you can get, if you want to get really fancy and all that sort of stuff, we can go into our terrain editing window here, and I can then change over to, or we can go rough dirt, that's fine. So we can put a bit of rough dirt down in here. Obviously you are limited to 4 textures per chunk, so you'll need to just check what textures you have in your chunk, and I mean that, what I mean by that is the square that we're working in here. I've gone through this before in other videos, so you might be limited depending on where you're working. On the map that you're going to possibly attempt to do this on, you might be limited a little bit on what textures you can play with. I can play with a few here, so we might want to add in a little bit of pig mud on top of that just to give it a bit of a lighter shade of texture, or whatever else you want to do. Have a bit of an experiment and play around, that'll do. For that, that's fine. So we've got our liquid trigger all set up now. We can move on to the next one, and this is our hay bale. So I might want to maybe bring that over to here somewhere. Not quite as close to the water trough, I don't think. Can be a little bit tricky to find the right positioning, and it's giving me grief again. That'll be fine somewhere like that, and we'll just make sure it's not floating in the air. That'll be fine. There we go. Okay, so we've now got some of the parts there set up, and we're going to work now with our new one, our plane. So if we come into somewhere over here, what I'll do is I'll just move this across, and we'll put this into the actual shed here, or the undercover part, and we'll move this in like so, something like that. And again, you can resize all of this stuff, so you can resize your plane and whatever else to make it look, bigger and smaller and whatever you want to do with it. I'm just going to go with that, that's fine. And then I will work with my trigger. So I've got my tip trigger, wherever that's gone. There we go. So now I've actually got this into the map. You can see the tip trigger is not really going to be big enough, so I'm going to need to adjust that slightly. So again, I can come into here and just adjust this a little bit more. So I'll go 3 and 3. And again, this is something you need to obviously experiment with. You could, if you wanted to, make it really big, cover the entire shed, so it wouldn't matter where you tipped, anywhere around that particular, I'm going to call it a shed, but I don't know exactly what it is. Is it a shed? Who cares? It's a building of some description. So yeah, you can play around with the trigger and do what you want with that there. I'm just going to leave it like that, that's fine. And then obviously we need to set our heap up to the correct height and whatever else. So what we're going to do is we're just going to bring this right the way down, so it's just underneath the ground a little bit like so. And we'll take our number from here, and then we come back to our tip trigger, and we have our move min y, and we can put that number into there. Go back to our heap, and we can then raise it up to whatever we want it to be, so something like that. Take the number from our translate y, come back into our tip trigger, transform group, and then have our move max y. So now that will theoretically move from this position up to the other position when we put our carrots in. So we're going to do that. I'm going to delete those because I took this heap from another mod that I created, which was actually a based around the dog face root crop storage, and I converted it, or used the same building but then added a heap into it, a moving plane, and also set it up with the M Company graphic script, and whatever else. So I just took it from there really, which in all fairness, it actually came from another mod previously to that. So, and all I've done is just literally change the textures. I believe it started off as chaff, now it's carrot. So yeah, just working with what I've got here. Okay, so anyway, we've now set all of that up, and that's fine. So what we need to do now then is look at our start and end points for our trigger itself. So this could be a little bit tricky because obviously we don't see the actual trigger. If you wanted to, what you could do is come in, go into your shapes, and then make it renderable again so you can actually see it. And then we can take our start point from here. So I'll move this one out to somewhere here, like so. And one of these start and end points on your tip triggers can be a little bit freaky at times. So what you may again find is you'll need to go into game, test it, and if it works, great, fantastic. If it doesn't, you may need to come back into G and just move these around a little bit until you get it to work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go Shift, Control, and C. That's Left, Shift, Left, Control, and C on the keyboard to take the Translate X attributes, and then I'm going to click on the end one, and I'm going to paste them all with Left, Shift, Left, Control, and V, so it matches that. And then all I can do there is just literally move it crossways so that it's using the same Z-axis, but it's using, I'm just adjusting it on the the X-axis, so they keep in a sort of line, if you like, on the X-axis. And we'll test that out. Hopefully that'll work, and that should be fine. And I know where the tip trigger is. I'm not going to mess about with putting bits and pieces, but you know, if you wanted to complete it, what I would probably do is have some sort of a marker on the ground, or you could get a sign and then just change it so that it says carrots here or something like that. Whatever you want to do. I'm not going to do that for the video though. So we'll go back to our trigger and make it non-renderable again. But I know I need to come into this area to tip my carrots. That's fine. Okay, so now that we've got all of the objects set up in the appropriate places, visible objects and whatever else, a couple of other things we need to look at is with the actual animals trigger set up for the M company and the reg animals script, which we'll get to shortly once we've set all this up. We have an additionals section within the mod itself, and this is where our actual animal trigger is, as you can see right there. So again, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to highlight that main transform group and just put that in the middle of the field where we're working, and then I can actually highlight the trigger itself and move that separately. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go Control B and the interactive placement, and we'll put it somewhere over here where the actual gate is. So I'd come through the gate and then obviously hit the trigger, but I don't want to have it so close to the gate itself that I could have a conflict with triggers. So I'm just going to align it with the gate itself, something like that. And I've got my visible icon, the actual horse icon here, so I know where the trigger is. It's giving me that visible icon there, so not too fussed about that side of things. So we've set all of that up. Then lastly, well, I say lastly, there's a couple of things we need to do. But when it comes to the triggers, we have our interactive trigger. So again, this is something, you know, we need to obviously make somewhat obvious where it is. You can put this up, put this wherever you want to put it. For me, I'm going to probably say I'm going to use the interactive placement again, and we'll put it somewhere over here like so. Might need to, or might want to resize it slightly so it's not so big. Because of this type of mod, I don't want to come into my pony husbandry area, and no matter where I walk around in this area, I constantly have the M Company graphics shoved in my face. I want it so that I can come in, find the area that I get my information, and then once I've got the information I need, I can walk out of that trigger and walk around without it constantly being there. So again, you know, this is going to be something you'll need to experiment with. So what I'll probably do here is half the size of this, so we can go down to 5 and 5, and then I'll just basically put it somewhere like so. And then for me, what I would probably do here is I would take something like, if I can find it, information icon. So what I can do here is I can actually highlight that, and I deleted what I should have kept, but it's fine, I can redo it again. So what we'll do here is we'll make a copy of this, and I'll click off of everything. I'm going to then Control V to paste it so it's down the bottom here. I'm going to create a new transform group, and then I'm going to highlight that, Control X, I'm going to click on my pony husbandry main cube, Control V, so it puts it at the bottom here, and then I'm going to name this visuals, which is the one I deleted and shouldn't have done. We'll take that one, Control X, click on our visuals transform group we just created, Control V and paste that in. Now I can highlight that, Control B, click on the map, and we can reposition this to the correct position for our trigger. So and we'll just check our position of our interactive trigger here, and we might need to move it in just a little bit further so we could come in a bit further and then over. And that'll be fine. You know, you can play around with that to your heart's content and get it where you want to get it. Might actually raise it up slightly so it's not so buried in the grass. There we go, something like that. That's fine. And then I would know, I would come into the pony husbandry area. I know where my tip trigger is because it's got the symbol there, and I've got my information trigger over here because I've got the actual icon there. So I can walk in, go into the area where the trigger is, get my M Company graphics, show up. I know exactly what I need and what I don't need to put into the actual unit. I can go and get that, bring it over, put it in, get it all working. Fantastic. Okay, so what I'm going to do there is I'm going to call this an end here and say this is part 1, because I think we're almost around an hour already on this. This is a very involved setup if you want to do what I've done here. I've made a lot of changes. If I were to just bring it over as it was, it would obviously take less time, but I wanted to make it my own really. So what I'm going to do here is end the video. Thank you very, very much for watching. I hope you join me in part 2, where it gets a little bit more, I'm going to say interesting. It is for me. I'm ShyWizard, and I'll catch you on the next one.